When an archangel who literally shaped universes at God's command materialized in Warhammer 40K, even the Chaos gods recoiled in terror, because Michael Demiurgos didn't see them as gods. He saw them as parasites in a broken reality he could simply unmake with a word. But here's what nobody expected. Could the being who serves the one true God actually fix the Imperium's nightmare, or would his absolute power prove that some realities are too corrupted to rescue? The forge world of Metallica Prime screamed with the sounds of war. Iron warriors had breached the outer defenses 3 days ago. Now their siege engines pounded the gates of the central manufactorum, where 30 million workers cowered behind walls of reinforced adamantium. Tech priest Dominus Calix stood in his laboratory, hands trembling as he made final adjustments to a machine that should not exist. The blueprints had been discovered in a vault sealed since the dark age of technology. Schematics that showed how to pierce the barrier between realities, how to reach beyond the warp, into something the ancients called the bleed. The data slate before him promised salvation. The ancients had written of a machine god who existed outside their reality, a being of pure order and logic who could save humanity from the chaos of the Imperium. Calix had devoted 40 years to rebuilding their device. Now, with iron warriors battering down the gates and his forge world burning, he had nothing left to lose. His augmented fingers danced across control panels. The machine hummed to life. Energy readings spiked beyond anything his sensors could measure. Reality itself began to tear. On the wall above the laboratory, a crack appeared in the air, not in the metal or stone, but in existence itself. It spread like lightning across an invisible surface, glowing with colors that had no names in human language. Calix fell to his knees, oil tears streaming from his bionic eyes. He had done it. He had reached beyond the warp, beyond the Imperium, into whatever lay outside this broken cosmos. The crack widened. Through it, something looked back. Michael Demiurgos had been investigating an anomaly at the edge of his father's creation when the summoning touched him. A pull from somewhere that should not exist, from a reality he had never encountered in all his eons of service. He turned his cosmic perception toward it and saw a universe fundamentally different from the one he knew. Where the presence had shaped creation with perfect intention, this place seemed twisted, corrupted at its very foundation. The warp and material reality bled together like infected wounds. He could have ignored the summons. Should have, perhaps. But Michael's nature was one of duty and investigation. If something was reaching out from a flawed reality, he needed to understand why. He extended his consciousness through the tear and allowed himself to be pulled through. The laboratory exploded with light as Michael materialized. Tech priest Calix shielded his optical sensors, servo skulls falling from the air as their systems overloaded. When the brightness faded, a figure stood where the dimensional rift had been. Tall, perhaps 7 feet in height, with features too perfect to be human. Wings of pure white light extended from his back. Not physical feathers, but solidified radiance that hurt to look upon directly. He wore simple robes that seemed woven from starlight itself. In his right hand, barely visible, flickered a flame that changed colors with each moment. The demiurgic flame, the power that shaped universes. Michael's eyes swept across the laboratory, taking in everything instantly. His perception operated on levels beyond human comprehension. In a single moment, he understood the technology around him, the genetic structure of the tech priest before him, the planetary situation outside, and the fundamental laws governing this reality. His expression shifted from curiosity to something like disgust. "This reality is flawed," he said, his voice resonating with harmonics that made the walls vibrate. "Incomplete. Who shaped this broken creation?" Calix tried to speak, but his voxcaster stuttered. He finally managed words through his biological throat. "Great Omnissiah, we have called you forth to deliver us from the forces of chaos. The Iron Warriors besiege our forge. We are your faithful servants." Michael turned his full attention to the tech priest. Calix felt the weight of that gaze like a physical pressure, as if the archangel could see through his augmented flesh to the soul beneath, through that soul to its component pieces, through those pieces to the fundamental code that made him exist. "I am not your Omnissiah," Michael replied. "I serve the presence, The one true God who shaped my reality with perfect intention. And this place reeks of pretenders. Before Calyx could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. The Iron Warriors had broken through the final gate. Through the laboratory's viewing port, Michael observed the traitor space marines flooding into the manufactorum's lower levels. Workers fled screaming. Some turned to fight with industrial tools and stubber weapons. They died within seconds, torn apart by bolt rounds or crushed beneath ceramite boots. Michael watched the slaughter with an expression of cold assessment. He raised one hand toward the viewing port. The demiurgic flame flickered between his fingers, barely visible but radiating power that made reality itself ripple. He spoke a single word in a language that predated human speech, that existed before language itself was conceived. The word of unmaking. In the manufactorum below, Iron Warriors simply ceased to exist. Not killed, not destroyed, but erased from reality as if they had never been. Their weapons clattered to the floor, no longer held by anything. Their armor stood empty for a moment before collapsing into component pieces. The corruption that had twisted their gene seed. The chaos blessings that had sustained them for millennia. The very atoms that composed their bodies. All of it, unmade. Returned to a state of never having existed. Within 30 seconds, 500 Iron Warriors vanished from reality. Their siege engines fell silent. No crews to operate them. Their void ships in orbit drifted aimlessly, their commanders and navigators simply gone. Across the entire Metallica system, every single Iron Warrior involved in the invasion blinked out of existence. Even their records began to fade, reality adjusting to accommodate their removal. Tech Priest Calyx stared in absolute shock. His sensors registered no weapons discharge, no energy expenditure that could account for what he had witnessed. The Archangel had not attacked the Iron Warriors. He had simply decided they should not exist, and reality had obeyed. The Omnissiah, Calyx whispered, falling to his knees. Throughout the Forge world, Vox channels crackled with reports and prayers. The Tech Priests had witnessed a miracle beyond their understanding. Surely this was there, machine God made manifest, the perfect fusion of divine will and physical law. Michael turned away from the viewing port, his expression unchanged. I am not your God. I serve the God, the presence who shaped creation itself. Your mechanical devotions are misplaced. He looked at Calyx with something between pity and disappointment. Take me to your Emperor. I would speak with the being who dares claim divinity in a universe not of his making. Before Calyx could respond, the laboratory doors burst open. Skitarii warriors flooded in, weapons raised. Behind them came battle servitors, their heavy bolters trained on Michael. A Tech Priest Magos entered, his voice booming through Vox speakers. Unknown entity, you will submit to examination and cataloging. By the authority of the Adeptus Mechanicus, you are hereby claimed as Archaeotech for study and integration. Michael regarded the armed forces with the same detached interest one might show examining insects. He spoke another word, softer this time. The weapons in the Skitarii's hands transformed mid-aim. Lasguns became flowering vines. Bolt pistols turned to clusters of crystal that chimed like bells. Heavy bolters shifted into sculptures of frozen water that dripped slowly onto the laboratory floor. Not destroyed, not disabled. Fundamentally altered at the atomic level into something completely different. The Skitarii stared at their transformed weapons in incomprehension. The Magos' optical sensors flickered rapidly, trying to process what his instruments had recorded. No energy signature, no molecular disassembly. The weapons had simply become other things, as naturally as if they had always been that way. I am not hostile, Michael stated calmly. I do not wish to harm anyone in this place, but your weapons cannot affect me, and your authority means nothing to a servant of the presence. Now, will you take me to your Emperor peacefully, or must I find my own way to Terra? Within the hour, astropathic messages screamed across the segmentum solar. An entity of unknown origin and impossible power had manifested on Metallica Prime. It had erased an entire Chaos Warband from existence with a thought. It demanded audience with the Emperor himself. The Inquisition mobilized. The Adeptus Custodes were notified. On distant Terra, within the throne room of the Imperial Palace, the Emperor of Mankind turned his ancient attention toward this new development. The being that called itself Michael Demiurgos requested transport to the throne world. It did not threaten, it did not negotiate. It simply stated its intention and waited. Tech priest Dominus Calyx, kneeling before the Archangel, asked the question that echoed through every Imperial Vox channel in the sector. "What are you?" Michael's wings of light folded against his back. The demiurgic flame flickered between his fingers. "I am the hand that shaped galaxies at my Father's command. I am the Archangel of creation, the wielder of the power that gives form to reality itself. In my cosmos, I serve the one true God, the presence whose will defines existence." He looked toward Terra, his perception crossing light years in an instant to observe the golden throne and the withered being seated upon it. His expression hardened. "And I am here to speak with your false god about the broken reality he claims to rule." The journey to Terra took 3 weeks by conventional warp travel, but Michael Demiurgos did not travel conventionally. He simply walked through the walls of reality as if they were suggestions rather than barriers. The inquisitorial vessel assigned to transport him found itself unnecessary. Their navigators reported impossible readings. The Archangel moved through the warp without a Geller field, without protection of any kind, walking through the Imperium as casually as one might stroll through a garden. Daemons that approached him simply ceased their approach, turning away as if forgetting why they had been interested. The warp itself seemed to part around him, creating a corridor of stable space wherever he walked. When the vessel translated back into real space at the edge of the Sol system, Michael was already there, standing in the void without a suit, without air, looking at Terra with eyes that saw far more than visible light. He observed the planet not as it appeared, but as it truly was, a world wrapped in layers of psychic energy, billions of souls crying out in prayer to a being who sat entombed at its heart. The Astronomicon blazed like a lighthouse, powered by the daily sacrifice of thousands of psychers. Michael's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment, perhaps, or recognition of a familiar pattern playing out in an unfamiliar way. He descended toward the planet, passing through orbital defense platforms that tried to track him and failed. Their targeting systems reported his position everywhere and nowhere. Weapons that achieved lock found themselves unable to fire, their machine spirits confused by an entity that should not exist according to any known law of physics. The Adeptus Custodes monitored his approach from the Imperial Palace, their Captain General standing in the Strategium with a troubled expression. They had faced demons, primarchs, xenos, warlords, and every imaginable threat to the Emperor in their 10,000 years of service. But this entity registered on their instruments as something else entirely, not warp-touched, not xenos, not human, simply other, in a way that defied classification. Michael walked through the outer walls of the Imperial Palace without breaking stride. Stone and steel parted around him like water, reforming behind him as if never disturbed. Custodian guard moved to intercept, their guardian spears held ready. The Archangel regarded them with the same detached interest he had shown the Skitarii on Metallica Prime. These warriors were magnificent by human standards, gene-crafted to perfection, clad in auramite armor that gleamed with inner light. But to Michael, they were still fundamentally limited, still mortal, still bound by the physics of this flawed reality. The first custodian thrust his spear toward Michael's chest. The weapon, blessed by the Emperor himself, capable of slaying greater daemons, passed through the Archangel as if through empty air. Michael had simply made himself imperceptible to the weapon, not invisible, not intangible, but existing in a state where the spear's physical laws could not interact with his. He spoke a word, gentle but absolute. The custodian's weapons transformed in their grips. Guardian spears became staffs of living wood that sprouted flowers. Bolters shifted into instruments that played soft music. Unchanged were the warriors themselves, untouched and unharmed, but their tools of war had been fundamentally rewritten at the atomic level. "I do not wish to harm the Emperor's guardians," Michael said, his voice carrying clearly despite the lack of Vox amplification. But your weapons cannot touch me, and your duty to protect him is misplaced. I am not here to destroy. I am here to understand, and to speak truth to a being who has wrapped himself in lies for far too long." He continued walking. The custodians followed, weaponless but vigilant, knowing that if this entity wished them dead, they would already be so. Through corridors that stretched for miles, past chapels where millions prayed, across bridges suspended above chasms that dropped into the planet's crust, Michael walked with purpose. His perception guided him unerringly toward the Sanctum Imperialis, toward the throne room where the Master of Mankind waited. The massive doors to the throne room stood 300 feet high, inscribed with wards and seals accumulated over 10 millennia. They were designed to resist demonic intrusion, to repel psychic assault, to withstand physical force that could crack continents. Michael placed his hand against them and they simply faded. Not destroyed, but temporarily removed from this layer of reality. He stepped through the space where they had been and entered the throne room of the God Emperor of Mankind. The chamber was vast beyond human scale, its boundaries lost in shadows and distance. At its center stood the Golden Throne, a mountain of technology and psychic architecture that sustained the dying god corpse of humanity's greatest leader. Tubes and cables thick as tree trunks connected the throne to systems that extended deep into Terra's core. 10,000 tech priests maintained the machinery in constant prayer. Silent sisters stood in formation, their null presence creating zones of psychic emptiness. And arrayed in perfect ranks, 1,000 custodians held vigil, the greatest warriors humanity had ever produced, standing eternal guard over their lord. Upon the throne sat the Emperor. His physical body was withered beyond recognition, sustained only by the throne's mechanisms and his own indomitable will. But his psychic presence filled the chamber like pressure fills the deep ocean, immense and crushing and absolute. When that presence focused upon Michael, the very air grew thick with power. Lesser beings would have been driven mad or burned to ash by such attention. The archangel stood unmoved. Their first exchange was not in words, but in pure thought. Consciousness, meeting consciousness across the gap between their natures. The Emperor's psychic voice resonated through Michael's mind with the weight of 10,000 years of absolute authority. "You trespass, entity. Identify yourself before the Master of Mankind." Michael's response carried no deference, no fear, only cold assessment. "I am Michael Demiurgos, Archangel of the Presence, wielder of the demiurgic flame that shapes creation itself. I have stood in the presence of the one true God and carried out his will across galaxies. I shape universes at my Father's command. And you, powerful as you are not him. You are a psyker, immensely strong but fundamentally limited. You are not divine. You are a pretender wearing a crown you did not earn." The temperature in the throne room dropped instantly. Frost formed on golden surfaces. The custodians moved as one, ready to defend their lord against this blasphemy. But the Emperor raised one withered hand, a gesture that froze them in place. His response came slowly, weighted with ancient patience. "I am humanity's guardian. I am the astronomicon that guides them through darkness. I am the bulwark against chaos, the shield against extinction. What I am called, whether god or tyrant, matters less than what I do. I have sacrificed everything, endured 10,000 years of agony, to keep mankind alive in a universe that seeks their destruction. You judge me from a position of ignorance, Archangel. You know nothing of this reality's demands." Michael stepped closer to the throne, his wings of light casting strange shadows across the golden machinery. "You are correct. I do not know this reality well, but I know broken creation when I see it. I have served in the presence of perfection, of divine intention made manifest. This place is wrong. The warp and materium bleed together like infected wounds. Entities you call chaos gods feed on the emotions of living beings. The very structure of your cosmos is diseased." He raised his hand, the demiurgic flame flickering between his fingers. "In my reality, creation was shaped with purpose and care by the Presence himself. Evil exists, yes, but it is not fundamental to the fabric of existence. Here, suffering seems woven into reality's foundation. That is not natural order. That is defect. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his psychic voice carried something new, curiosity mixed with grim humor. You believe this reality is flawed. Then show me your alternative, Lightbringer. Show me how a servant of perfection would manage this imperfect cosmos. I grant you temporary stewardship of a single sector. Reshape it according to your divine principles. Let us see if your father's methods work in a universe he did not create. Michael hesitated. This was not what he had expected. He had come to confront a false god, to expose the lie at the heart of the Imperium. Instead, he was being offered a test. The Emperor was not defending his methods through argument, but through demonstration. Show me better. The ancient being challenged. Prove that your way works here. I accept, Michael said finally. But understand this. I will not compromise my principles. I will not sacrifice the weak for efficiency. I will not rule through fear and oppression. I will show you what true divine order looks like, even in a broken reality. The Emperor's laughter echoed through the throne room, psychic and bitter and weary. Then you have already failed, Archangel. But proceed. I am 10,000 years old. I can afford to watch you learn what I learned in the fires of the Horus heresy. Michael was granted full authority over the Ultramar sector, 500 worlds that had once been the pride of Robut Guilliman's domain. He arrived at Macrogh, the sector capital, and immediately began his work. The demiurgic flame blazed in his hands as he spoke words of creation and restoration, reality itself, bent to his will in ways the Imperium had never witnessed. First, he removed all chaos taint from the sector. Every cultist, every corrupted artifact, every whisper of the dark gods, all of it unmade. Planets that had suffered demonic incursions for centuries suddenly found their nightmares ended. The warp itself seemed to recoil from Ultramar, unable to touch what Michael had declared clean. Second, he healed every sickness and mutation. Plague worlds became green again. Radiation-poisoned hive cities found their air purified. Citizens suffering from centuries of genetic degradation were restored to perfect health. The dying lived. The crippled walked. Abumans found their mutations reversed, becoming baseline human again. Third, he created abundance. Using the demiurgic flame, Michael spoke matter into existence. Food materialized in empty storage facilities. Water flowed clean and pure from previously toxic rivers. Resources appeared where there had been scarcity. The grinding, poverty that defined life for billions of Imperial citizens simply ended. Fourth, he removed the apparatus of oppression. Arbeit stations stood empty as crime rates dropped to near zero, people no longer desperate enough to steal or kill. Planetary defense forces were reduced, their weapons stored away, because what need did Paradise have for soldiers? The Inquisition was quietly asked to leave Ultramar. Their services no longer required where there was no heresy to root out. For 6 months, Ultramar shone like a jewel among the stars. Citizens lived without fear, without hunger, without the daily grind of survival that defined Imperial existence. They had time for art, for family, for contemplation of beauty rather than mere endurance. Some began to worship Michael as a true god, which he rejected with the same firmness he had rejected the Mechanicus's adoration. Others simply enjoyed their lives without concerning themselves with theology. Robute Guilliman recently returned to active command of his Ultramarines. Watched this transformation with growing unease. He met with Michael on the steps of the fortress of Hera, where the Primarch had once ruled his perfect miniature empire. What you have done is miraculous, Guilliman said carefully, but I wonder if you understand what you have created. Not a sector, but a target. Michael regarded the Primarch with interest. Here was a being touched by the Emperor's own power, gene-crafted to be the pinnacle of human achievement. And yet he sounded worried rather than grateful. Explain your concern. You have made us bright, Guilliman replied. In a galaxy where the strong prey on the weak, where predators are drawn to light like moths to flame, you have turned Ultramar into a beacon. You have removed our defenses, eliminated our hardness, our bitterness. You have made us soft, Archangel. And now everything hungry in the void is turning its attention toward us. As if summoned by the Primarch's words, reality proved him correct. At the edge of ultramar space, a Tyranid hive fleet translated from the void, its bioships blooming like horrible flowers against the stars. Trillions of hungry organisms, guided by a Gestalt intelligence, descended toward the sector that radiated life and abundance so brightly. Michael rose into the void to face them. He raised his hand and spoke a word of unmaking. The first wave of bioships simply ceased to exist, erased from reality as the Iron Warriors had been. But the hive fleet was vast, containing millions of vessels. For every 100 Michael unmade, 1,000 more pressed forward. He worked for hours, speaking words of destruction, until even his cosmic endurance began to strain. He could unmake individual threats endlessly, but the hive fleet kept coming, kept adapting, kept finding new approaches. While Michael fought in the void, other threats manifested. Nurgle, sensing the pure, clean life energy radiating from Ultramar, sent plague fleets, specifically because the contrast was so delicious to the plague god. Where there was purity, corruption was most sweet. 7 plague hulks entered the system, vomiting viral payloads that Michael had to intercept and destroy. On the surface of 3 different worlds, Slaanesh cults exploded into being. The citizens of Ultramar, given abundance and free will and no purpose beyond pleasure, proved perfect recruits for she who thirsts. Without the grinding oppression of imperial rule to occupy their minds, without daily survival to focus their energies, some turned to ever more extreme forms of pleasure-seeking. Excess fed excess. Within weeks, entire cities had fallen to Slaanesh worship. A Necron tomb world, dormant for 60 million years, awakened beneath Macraga's southern continent. Its sensors had detected the demiurgic energy Michael wielded, recognizing it as similar to the Cetan powers their ancient masters had imprisoned. The Necron overlord led his legions to the surface, determined to capture or destroy this new threat. Michael fought on every front simultaneously. He unmade Tyranids in orbit. He purged plague ships from the void. He descended to worlds consumed by Slaanesh and tried to restore the fallen, speaking words that cleansed corruption from their souls. But many died in the cleansing, their being so intertwined with chaos that removing it meant removing essential parts of themselves. He faced the Necrons in battle, his demiurgic power matching their ancient technology in displays of reality warping that scarred the landscape. And still, more threats came. An Orkwa, attracted by the concentrated fighting, entered the sector from the galactic east. Dark Eldar, sensing weakness and opportunity, launched raids to capture the abundant, healthy humans for their flesh markets. A Craftworld Eldar force arrived, concerned that Michael's reality manipulation might tear holes in the webway. Guilliman stood on Macraga's orbital defense platform, watching the burning sky. Michael appeared beside him, his wings dimmed, the demiurgic flame flickering weakly between his fingers. For the first time, the Archangel looked tired. "I can stop each threat individually," Michael said, his voice heavy with realization. "But they keep coming. The brighter I make Ultramar shine, the more predators are attracted to its light. I solve one problem and create 3 more. The abundance I created means these worlds are prizes worth fighting over. The peace I established means they have no defenses to resist invasion. The purity I imposed makes them targets for corruption." Guilliman nodded slowly. My father knew this truth. Humanity survives in this galaxy not by shining brightly, but by being too bitter, too poor, too difficult to consume. The Imperium's cruelty is not sadism. It is camouflage. It keeps us beneath the notice of the greatest predators. When we show weakness, when we show wealth, when we show anything worth taking, the galaxy descends upon us like starving wolves. Michael looked at his hands, at the demiurgic flame that could reshape reality itself. In his cosmos, this power had been used to create beauty and order. Here, every act of creation seemed to invite destruction. Every improvement made things worse in ways he had not anticipated. The Emperor's challenge had been a lesson, and Michael was learning it painfully. He raised his hands one final time. The demiurgic flame blazed bright, and he spoke a long sequence of long words that took an hour to complete. Across Ultramar, his changes began to reverse. Not all of them, but enough. The abundance remained, but scarcity was reintroduced in measured amounts. The healings held, but some hardship returned to toughen the survivors. The defenses were rebuilt, weapons redistributed, armies reformed. The sector returned to something resembling Imperial standard. Better than before, but not paradisiacal. Improved but not perfected. The threats, sensing the sector, becoming less appetizing, began to withdraw. The Tyranids moved on to easier prey. The plague fleets returned to the warp. The Necrons went back to their tombs, no longer interested now that the strange energy had faded. Ultramar survived, but it survived because it had become less special, less worthy of attention. Michael stood alone on the highest peak of Macragge, looking at the stars. He had failed. Not in power. He had power enough to reshape galaxies, but in understanding. This reality operated under rules so different from his own that his principles, his methods, his entire approach had proven not just inadequate, but actively harmful. He had tried to impose order from his father's perfect creation onto a cosmos that had never known such grace, and the result had been disaster barely averted. The Emperor's words echoed in his mind. "Then you have already failed, Archangel." The ancient being had known, had watched Michael make every mistake, follow every doomed path, learn every lesson the hard way, because some truths could not be taught, only experienced. Michael spread his wings and flew back toward Terra. He had much to say to the false god on the golden throne. But now he would speak from a position not of judgment, but of terrible new understanding. Michael Demiurgos returned to Terra in silence. His wings folded tight against his back. The demiurgic flame dim between his fingers. The journey took mere moments as he folded space around himself, stepping through reality's layers like walking through curtains. When he materialized in the throne room of the Imperial Palace, the custodians did not move to stop him. They had received word from Ultramar. They knew what had happened. The Archangel who had promised to show them a better way now returned with the weight of failure upon his shoulders. The Emperor sat upon the golden throne as he had for 10,000 years, his withered form unchanged, his psychic presence as overwhelming as before. But when his consciousness touched Michael's mind this time, there was no mockery in his voice, no bitter triumph, only ancient weariness and something that might have been sympathy. "You understand now," the Emperor stated. "Not a question, but an observation. You see why I am what I am. Why the Imperium is what it is." Michael stood before the throne, his perfect features showing an emotion he rarely experienced. Uncertainty. "I understand that my methods do not work here. That the principles which guided me in serving the presence cannot be directly applied to this broken reality. But understanding failure is not the same as accepting your approach as correct." He stepped closer, his voice carrying pain and confusion. "In my cosmos, I have shaped galaxies according to divine will. I have built wonders that would make your golden palace seem like a child's toy. I have stood in the presence of absolute good, felt the presence's perfect intention flowing through every act of creation. And I brought that experience here, certain that purity and order would triumph over chaos and darkness, as they always have before." The Archangel's wings spread slightly, light flickering across golden surfaces. "But this reality rejects purity. It punishes order. Every improvement I made became a weapon used against the very people I tried to help. The abundance I created made them targets. The healing I provided made them soft. The peace I established made them vulnerable. I tried to impose my father's design upon a cosmos that operates under completely different rules." The Emperor's psychic voice resonated through the chamber. "This universe was not shaped by your presence, Archangel. It grew wild, without divine guidance, without perfect intention. The warp reflects the emotions of living beings, creating gods from their worst impulses. Physics itself is negotiable here, warped by belief and willpower. There is no benevolent creator watching over this reality, ensuring that good ultimately triumphs. There is only what is, and what we can endure." Michael's hands clenched, the demiurgic flame flaring brighter for a moment. "Then, this reality is fundamentally wrong. It should not exist in this state. In a properly ordered creation, your methods would be monstrous. The daily sacrifice of thousands of psychers to fuel the Astronomicon, the grinding oppression that keeps billions in poverty and ignorance. the casual expenditure of human life in the name of efficiency. These things are evil by any reasonable moral standard. Yes, the Emperor agreed, his answer shocking in its simplicity. They are evil. I am evil by the standards of a better universe. But we do not live in a better universe, Michael. We live in this one, and in this cosmos, my evil is the only thing standing between humanity and extinction. The throne room fell silent, except for the constant hum of machinery sustaining the Emperor's life. Tech priests continued their maintenance rituals, chanting in binary. Silent sisters stood like statues, their null presence creating pockets of emptiness in the psychic pressure. The custodians watched the exchange between God and angel, witnessing a theological debate that would have driven lesser minds to madness. Michael felt something he had not experienced in eons. Genuine doubt about his purpose. In his reality, serving the presence meant serving absolute good. Orders were clear. Morality was defined. Evil was recognizable and could be fought directly. Here, evil was survival. Cruelty was necessity. The being who claimed to protect humanity did so through methods that would horrify the presence. I cannot serve you, Michael said finally. You are not the presence. You are not even attempting to be good in the way I understand goodness. You are a tyrant who has made himself indispensable, who rules through fear and demands worship through force. Everything I am, everything I was created to be, rebels against bowing to such a being. The Emperor's response carried no anger, only patient explanation. I do not ask you to serve me, Michael. I ask you to consider whether this reality can be saved at all, and if so, what price you are willing to pay for that salvation. You have power beyond my own in some ways. The demiurgic flame you wield could reshape this entire galaxy if you chose. But power without understanding is destruction, as you learned in Ultramar. He paused, and Michael felt the full weight of 10,000 years of perspective pressing against his consciousness. I was once like you, Archangel. I believed in human potential, in enlightenment, in leading mankind to a glorious future. I built an Imperium based on reason and science, rejecting religion and superstition. I created 20 sons, gene-forged Primarchs who would lead humanity to dominance over the galaxy. I believed I could guide them to perfection. The Emperor's psychic presence seemed to darken, memories of ancient betrayal coloring his words. Then half my sons turned to chaos. My most beloved child, Horus, struck me down and nearly destroyed everything I had built. I learned that faith in human reason was insufficient, that enlightenment could not save souls from corruption, that the only way to protect humanity in this broken cosmos was to become the very thing I had once despised, a god-tyrant ruling through fear and unquestioned authority. Michael listened, his cosmic perception allowing him to feel the genuine pain beneath the Emperor's words. This was not the speech of a simple tyrant. This was confession from a being who had made impossible choices and lived with their consequences for 10 millennia. Show me, Michael said suddenly. Show me what you see when you look at this reality. Not through my eyes, shaped by service to the presence, but through yours, hardened by 10,000 years of endless war. The Emperor's psychic presence surged, and suddenly Michael was no longer standing in the throne room. He was everywhere and nowhere, his consciousness merged with the Emperor's own, seeing the galaxy through ancient eyes that had witnessed horrors beyond counting. He saw the warp in its true form, not as Michael had perceived it during his brief investigation, but as the Emperor monitored it constantly. A roiling sea of emotion and madness where 4 great powers held court. Khorne, fed by every act of violence across the galaxy. Nurgle, sustained by every acceptance of decay and despair. Tzeentch, empowered by every scheme and hope for change. Slaanesh, growing fat on every excess and pleasure. They were not merely evil entities that could be unmade. They were fundamental aspects of this reality, woven into its structure by 60 million years of mortal emotion. Michael felt the Emperor's constant struggle. His psychic might stretched across the entire Imperium, holding together a structure that threatened to collapse every moment. The Astronomicon required his eternal attention, a lighthouse in the warp that guided trillions of ships. Without it, human civilization would fragment into isolated worlds, easy prey for Xenos, predators, and chaos incursions. The Golden Throne itself was failing, breaking down molecule by molecule, and only the Emperor's will kept it functioning long enough for the tech priests to make repairs that were always insufficient, always temporary. He saw through the Emperor's memory, witnessed the Horus heresy in all its terrible detail. Sons turning on their father, brother fighting brother, entire worlds burning as civil war consumed the Imperium. He felt the Emperor's anguish as Horus, most beloved of his children, struck him down. Felt the Emperor's choice in that final moment, to kill his son, to destroy the one he loved most, because mercy would have meant damnation for all mankind. He saw the 10,000 years that followed, the Emperor entombed upon the Golden Throne, unable to speak except through the rarest psychic channels, watching as his vision of enlightened humanity was twisted into the ecclesiarchy's rigid dogma. Watching as the Imperium he had built became more brutal, more oppressive, more cruel with each passing century, unable to stop it, unable to guide them toward better paths, only able to hold the Astronomicon steady and pray that humanity would survive another day. He felt the daily sacrifice. 1,000 psychers fed into the Golden Throne's machinery every day, their souls consumed to keep the Emperor alive and the Astronomicon burning. He felt each one die, felt their terror, their pain, their final prayers. 10,000 years times 1,000 deaths per day. 3,650,000,000 souls sacrificed to keep humanity from extinction. Each one felt by the Emperor. Each one mourned in the tiny fragment of his attention that remained human enough to mourn. The vision ended, and Michael found himself back in the throne room, staggering under the weight of what he had witnessed. Tears streamed down his perfect face, the first time in eons he had wept. Not for himself, but for the Emperor, trapped in eternal agony, for the billions who suffered under imperial rule, for the trillions who had died in endless wars, for a reality so fundamentally broken that such suffering was necessary just to maintain existence. Now you understand, the Emperor said softly. I am not a tyrant by choice, Michael. I am a tyrant because mercy is extinction. Every time I have tried to ease humanity's burden, the galaxy has punished them for it. Every moment I have shown weakness, the forces of chaos have surged forward. I am cruel, because this reality allows nothing else. Michael sank to his knees, his wings folding around him like a cloak. This cosmos should not exist. It is wrong at every level. The Presence would never allow such suffering in a reality under his care. But the Presence is not here, the Emperor replied. There is only me, only my will, stretched across 10,000 years and 1,000,000 worlds. Only my cruelty standing between humanity and annihilation. You asked if I was worthy of worship. I am not. But I am all they have, and I will not abandon them no matter how much I might wish to. The Archangel remained kneeling, his mind processing concepts that contradicted everything his existence had been built upon. In his reality, good and evil were absolute. The Presence defined morality, and serving him meant serving righteousness. Here, morality was relative. Survival was the only absolute, and serving humanity meant becoming a monster. What would you have me do? Michael asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I cannot return to my reality and pretend I never saw this place. I cannot serve you as I serve the Presence, for you are not worthy of such devotion. But I cannot abandon this cosmos to its fate, knowing the suffering that exists here. What path remains? The Emperor considered for a long moment. I offer you no easy answers, Archangel. But I can present your options clearly. First, you could leave. Return to your reality, seal the dimensional breach, and forget this broken cosmos exists. Your duty is to the Presence's creation, not mine. There would be no shame in choosing your own people over strangers in a foreign reality. Michael felt the temptation of that choice. To return home, where serving good was simple, where the Presence's will provided clear direction, where he did not have to question every moral choice. But he also felt the memory of what he had seen through the Emperor's eyes. Could he abandon trillions to suffering when he had the power to help? Second, the Emperor continued, You could attempt to destroy this entire reality. Your demiurgic flame has the power to unmake creation. If this cosmos is so broken that it cannot be saved, perhaps mercy would be annihilation. Erase it completely and trust that whatever lies beyond death is better than this endless suffering. Michael shuddered at the suggestion. To unmake an entire reality would be an act of cosmic magnitude, beyond anything he had done even in the Presence's service. And who was he to judge that all the life in this galaxy deserved extinction? Yes, they suffered, but they also loved, hoped, dreamed. They created art and found joy in small moments despite the darkness. Could he take that from them? Third, the Emperor said, his psychic voice heavy with meaning, you could give me a portion of your demiurgic essence, strengthen the Golden Throne, enhance the Astronomicon. Give me the power to begin real reform, slowly transforming the Imperium over millennia into something less monstrous. It would not be quick. It would not be the paradise you tried to create in Ultramar. But it might be better than what exists now. Michael looked up sharply. You would have me empower a tyrant? Give you the tools to oppress humanity more effectively? I would have you give humanity a chance, the Emperor corrected. With greater power, I could reduce the daily sacrifice of psychers. I could strengthen Imperial defenses without requiring such brutal methods. I could begin to dismantle the worst aspects of the ecclesiarchy's dogma. Not quickly. Changes that rapid would destabilize everything, but gradually, over centuries. Your power could buy humanity time to evolve past the need for me. The Archangel stood slowly, his wings spreading to their full width, light filling the throne room. And what guarantee do I have that you would use such power wisely? That you would not simply become a more effective tyrant? None, the Emperor replied honestly. I offer no guarantees because I can make no promises about a future I cannot fully control. I can only tell you my intention. I never wanted to be a god tyrant, Michael. I wanted to be obsolete, to see humanity mature beyond the need for my guidance. If you strengthen me, I will use that strength to work toward the day when humanity no longer needs me at all. Michael closed his eyes, feeling the demiurgic flame pulse in his chest. This was a choice the Presence could not make for him. This was beyond the clear orders and absolute morality he had always known. This was judgment without perfect information. Action, without guaranteed outcome. This was what mortals faced every day of their lives, and now he understood why they found it so difficult. He thought of the citizens of Ultramar, whose paradise had nearly destroyed them. He thought of the psychers burning in the Golden Throne's machinery. He thought of the Emperor, suffering in eternal agony for 10,000 years to protect people who would never know his sacrifice. He thought of the Chaos Gods, feeding on mortal emotion, impossible to destroy without destroying the mortals themselves. And he made his choice. Michael Demiurgos stood in silence for what seemed like hours, though time moved strangely in the throne room where the Emperor's psychic presence warped reality itself. The custodians watched without moving, golden statues awaiting the Archangel's decision. Tech priests continued their rituals, maintaining the Golden Throne's countless systems. The Silent Sisters created pockets of null space in the overwhelming psychic pressure. All of them waited to see what choice an angel from another reality would make about the fate of their Imperium. Finally, Michael spoke. I choose none of your options, Emperor of Mankind. I will not leave, for that would be abandoning beings who suffer when I have power to ease that suffering. I will not destroy this reality, for that would be murder on a scale even I cannot justify, no matter how broken this cosmos might be. And I will not empower you, for giving a tyrant greater strength, even a necessary tyrant, goes against everything I am. The Emperor's presence shifted, surprise evident even in his ancient consciousness. Then what will you do, Archangel? You reject all paths I have shown you. What fourth option do you see that I, in 10,000 years of contemplation, have not considered? Michael raised his hand, the demiurgic flame blazing bright between his fingers. I will give this reality what it has never had, a foundation of true divine order, not imposed from above through tyranny, but woven into the structure of existence itself. I cannot fix the warp. It is too interconnected with mortal consciousness. I cannot remove the Chaos Gods, They are load-bearing elements of this broken creation. But I can strengthen the barriers between Materium and Immaterium. I can make reality itself more resistant to corruption. He stepped closer to the golden throne, his wings spreading wide, light filling the vast chamber until even the custodians had to shield their eyes. I will use the demiurgic flame to create a seal, a cosmic structure that stabilizes the boundary between real space and the warp. It will not make travel impossible. It will not prevent psychers from accessing their powers. But it will make demonic manifestation more difficult. It will slow the spread of chaos corruption. It will give this reality's natural laws more strength to resist being warped by belief and emotion. The Emperor's consciousness expanded, examining Michael's proposal from every angle. Such a working would require immense power. You would need to touch every point in the galaxy simultaneously, reshape the fundamental structure of how the warp and Materium interact. Even with your demiurgic flame, the effort might destroy you. Perhaps, Michael agreed. But it is the only path I can walk with clear conscience. I will not abandon this reality. I will not destroy it. I will not empower your tyranny. But I can give it a better foundation, a more stable structure. What you do with that stability is your choice, not mine. I will have done what I can without compromising my principles. He closed his eyes, gathering his power. The demiurgic flame grew brighter, spreading from his hand to engulf his entire form. His wings became pure light, extending beyond the physical boundaries of the throne room, reaching into dimensions the human eye could not perceive. He began to speak in the language of creation itself, words that existed before language was conceived, sounds that shaped reality at its most fundamental level. The Emperor watched, his ancient mind analyzing every moment of the working. He saw Michael's intent, pure and clear. This was not an attack. This was not an attempt to seize power. This was an angel doing what angels did, serving creation by strengthening its foundations. The Emperor had seen many wonders in his 40,000 years of existence, but this was something new. This was divinity from another cosmos, operating by rules his reality had never known. Michael's consciousness expanded beyond his physical form, touching the edges of the galaxy. He perceived the warp barrier not as a single surface, but as countless billions of intersection points where Immaterium met Materium. Each point was a wound, a place where the two realms bled into each other. He began to seal them, not closing them entirely, but adding structure, making the boundaries more defined. Where before the barrier had been like tissue paper, easily torn, he made it like flexible steel, able to bend but much harder to break. The work took days, though Michael experienced it as a single extended moment. His power flowed through the galaxy, touching every star system, every world where humanity struggled to survive. He did not heal them. He did not create abundance or remove suffering. He simply made reality itself more resistant to corruption, made the laws of physics slightly less negotiable, made the warp slightly less able to impose its madness upon material space. In the eye of terror, the Chaos Gods felt the change and screamed. Their influence over the material realm was not removed, but reduced by perhaps 5%. A tiny fraction. But across the entire galaxy, it meant millions of summoning rituals would fail, countless possessions would be prevented, innumerable warp storms would be slightly weaker. They raged against the barrier Michael was creating, throwing their combined might against it. But the demiurgic flame was not power from this reality. It did not play by the warp's rules. The barrier held despite their assault. Siench was the first to understand what had occurred. The architect of fate perceived the pattern Michael had woven, saw its implications stretching across millennia. The demiurge has not attacked us, the changer of ways whispered to its siblings. It has stabilized the game board, made reality less fluid, less subject to our influence. Korn roared in fury, seeing that manifestation in the material realm would now require more blood. Sacrifice. More death to punch through the strengthened barrier. Nurgle gurgled in displeasure, recognizing that his plagues would spread slightly slower, his corruption would take slightly longer to bloom. Slanesh laughed, a sound like breaking glass, acknowledging the challenge with perverse pleasure. But beneath their rage and frustration, All four Chaos Gods felt something they rarely experienced, a glimmer of existential fear. Michael had revealed himself as something from beyond their reality, something that operated by rules they did not fully understand. They had thought themselves eternal, fundamental forces of this cosmos. He had shown them they were local phenomena, powerful here but insignificant in the broader context of the omniverse. We are not gods, Tsiench realized, its ever-changing form flickering with uncertainty. We are tumors growing on a single reality, and the Demiurge could have excised us if it chose. It stayed its hand, not from weakness, but from judgment that we are load-bearing elements of this broken creation. The revelation shook the warp itself. For the first time in their existence, the Chaos Gods understood they were not apex entities. They were regional powers in a single flawed universe, and the multiverse contained forces far beyond their comprehension. Michael Demiurgos had not destroyed them, because doing so would collapse the reality they infested, not because he lacked the power to do it. Back in the throne room, Michael's physical form solidified again as the working completed. He stumbled, catching himself against a pillar, his wings dim, the demiurgic flame reduced to barely visible flickers between his fingers. The effort had drained him more than any task in his eons of service to the presence. But it was done. The seal was in place, woven into the fundamental structure of the Warhammer reality. "It is finished," he said, his voice hoarse. "The barrier between warp and materium is now approximately 5% stronger across the entire galaxy. Demonic manifestation will be more difficult. Chaos corruption will spread more slowly. Warp storms will be slightly less severe. It is not salvation, Emperor. It is only a band-aid on a severed artery. But it buys time." The Emperor's consciousness touched the new structure Michael had created, examining it with the skill of a being who had studied the warp for 40,000 years. "You have done what I could not," he said finally, something like respect in his psychic voice. "I have fought the Chaos Gods for 10 millennia, holding them at bay through constant struggle. You have changed the battlefield itself, made reality slightly less hospitable to their influence. This will save countless lives over the centuries to come." Michael shook his head weakly. "Do not thank me, tyrant. I did not do this for you. I did it because beings in this reality deserve a fighting chance. A cosmos that is not actively trying to destroy them at every moment. What you do with this reprieve is your responsibility. Use it wisely, or use it cruelly. That is your choice to make." He straightened, his strength slowly returning, the demiurgic flame growing brighter again, though still far from its full power. "I will not stay in this reality. I am not its savior. I am not its guardian. I am an archangel of the presence, and my duty lies in the creation he shaped, not in this broken cosmos I stumbled into by accident." The Emperor nodded, a gesture felt through psychic presence rather than physical movement. "You have given us more than you know, Michael Demiurgos. But before you leave, know this. Your intervention has not gone unnoticed. The Chaos Gods now know they are not eternal. That knowledge will make them more dangerous in some ways, more desperate. They will seek to undo what you have done." "Let them try," Michael replied. "The seal is woven into reality's foundation. Only another being wielding demiurgic power could undo it. And such beings do not exist in this cosmos. Your Chaos Gods are powerful parasites, but they are not creators. They can only corrupt what already exists. They cannot unmake what I have made." He turned toward the massive doors of the throne room, preparing to leave, but something made him pause. He looked back at the Emperor, at the withered form upon the golden throne, at the being who had suffered 10,000 years of agony to protect a species that would never fully understand his sacrifice. "One more thing," Michael said quietly. He approached the throne, raising his hand. The demiurgic flame flickered between his fingers, and he touched it to the golden throne's machinery. Not empowering the Emperor, as had been suggested. Instead, he spoke a word that strengthened the throne itself, repairing damage at the molecular level, making its ancient systems slightly more efficient. The daily sacrifice of psychers required to sustain it dropped from 1,000 to 900. A small reduction, but over a year it would save 36,000 lives. "I will not empower you, false god," Michael said. but I will ease the suffering required to sustain you. Those 100 souls saved each day are my gift to this reality, not to you. What you do with the resources that freeze up is, again, your choice." The Emperor felt the change immediately, his consciousness able to perceive the improved efficiency of the Golden Throne systems. "Why?" he asked simply. "You have already done more than required. Why add this kindness to a being you call tyrant and false god?" Michael's expression was unreadable. "Because even in broken realities, even in the presence of necessary evil, small mercies matter. I cannot save everyone. I cannot fix everything. But I can save some. I can fix small things. And perhaps that has to be enough." He walked toward the doors, which opened before him without being touched. The custodians did not move to stop him. They had witnessed something beyond their understanding, and they knew better than to interfere with forces that operated on cosmic scales. As Michael passed through the throne room and into the corridors beyond, he felt the Emperor's psychic presence following him, observing his departure. He made his way through the Imperial Palace, passing chambers where millions worshipped a god who was not truly divine, where bureaucrats managed an empire built on suffering, where soldiers prepared for wars that would never end. He did not judge them. He no longer had the certainty required for judgment. He had learned in Ultramar that his principles did not translate cleanly to this reality. He had learned from the Emperor that sometimes cruelty was survival. He had learned from his own failure that power without context was destruction. At the palace's edge, he paused. Below him stretched the sprawl of Terra, a planet-spanning city where 40 billion humans lived in conditions that would horrify citizens of his home. Reality. But they lived. They survived. They found moments of joy amid the darkness. They loved and hoped and dreamed, despite everything working against them. And now, because of what Michael had done, they had slightly better odds of continuing to do so. Before leaving Terra entirely, Michael did one final thing. He descended into the underhives, into the deepest levels where even Imperial authority barely reached. There, in darkness and filth, he found a child. A girl, perhaps 8 years old, dying of a disease that would have been trivial to cure in his reality, but was death sentence here. She lay in an alley, alone and forgotten, one of countless billions who fell through the cracks of the Imperium's vast machinery. Michael knelt beside her. He placed his hand on her forehead and spoke a word of healing. The disease vanished from her body, cells restored to perfect health, malnutrition reversed, damage from years of suffering undone. She would live. She would be strong. She would have a chance. The girl's eyes fluttered open, looking at the angel with confusion and wonder. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I am Michael," he replied gently. "I am a traveler from far away. You are healed, child. You will live. Make something good of that life, if you can." "Are you an angel?" she asked. Michael considered the question. In his reality, yes, he was an archangel, second in power only to the presence himself. But here, in this broken cosmos, what did that mean? "I am someone who tried to help," he said finally. "That is all." He stood, preparing to depart. But the girl grabbed his hand. "Will you come back? Will you help more people?" The question pierced him more deeply than any weapon ever had. He looked into her eyes, seeing hope, genuine, uncorrupted hope, in a reality where such things were rare and precious. And he had to tell her the truth. "No," he said gently. "I cannot stay here. This is not my reality, not my responsibility. I have done what I can. The rest is up to the people who live here. To make this cosmos better, or to let it remain broken. I am sorry, child. I wish I could do more, but I cannot save everyone. I can only save you." Tears filled the girl's eyes, but she nodded with understanding beyond her years. In the Imperium, even children learned that hope was fragile and help was temporary. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving me." Michael spread his wings one final time, light filling the underhive darkness. He rose through layers of city, through kilometers of hab blocks and factories, through the atmosphere and into orbit. From space, he looked back at Terra one last time, the throne world of a tyrannical empire built on suffering but also containing moments of beauty, love, hope. He turned his cosmic perception toward the dimensional breach he had come through, still faintly detectable despite the distance. With a thought, he opened a pathway through the layers of reality, preparing to step back into his own cosmos. But before he did, he extended his awareness one final time to touch the warp itself. The four Chaos Gods waited there, watching him. They did not attack. They did not threaten. They simply observed, uncertain for perhaps the first time in their existence. Michael addressed them directly, his consciousness vast enough to speak to all four simultaneously. "You exist because this reality's consciousness is broken," he told them. "You feed on mortal emotion because the barrier between thought and existence is too thin here. You are powerful in this cosmos, but you are local phenomena. I have seen the broader omniverse, and you are insignificant in its context." He paused, letting that sink in. "I have stabilized the barrier between your realm and theirs. I have made reality slightly more resistant to your influence. Not enough to destroy you. That would collapse everything, but enough to give mortals a better chance. What happens next is between you and them. I will not be here to interfere further." Cinch, always the most verbal of the four, responded in a voice of layered whispers and contradictory tones. "You could have destroyed us, Demiurge. Why did you show mercy?" "Because you are load-bearing parasites," Michael replied coldly. "This reality is so corrupted that removing you would kill the patient. But do not mistake restraint for weakness. Do not mistake mercy for approval. If I thought this cosmos could survive your removal, I would have unmade you without hesitation. You are evil. You are suffering given form. The only reason you continue to exist is because the reality you infest is too broken to survive your excision." Korn roared, but it was not a roar of challenge. It was acknowledgement of truth. They were not eternal gods. They were cosmic cancer on a single flawed universe. And Michael Demiurgos had revealed that truth to them. With those final words, Michael stepped through the dimensional breach. Reality folded around him, layers of existence peeling back to reveal the path home. As he crossed the threshold back into his own cosmos, he sealed the breach behind him with the demiurgic flame. No more dimensional travelers would stumble between realities through this route. The Warhammer universe and his own were separated once more. In his own reality, Michael materialized in the Silver City, the realm where angels served the Presence's will. His brother Lucifer was there, leaning against a wall with characteristic nonchalance. "You were gone for weeks, brother," Lucifer observed. "Where did you wander?" Michael looked at his twin, his perfect mirror, the other being granted a portion of the Presence's power. "I found a broken reality," he said quietly. "A cosmos shaped without divine guidance, where suffering is woven into existence itself, where evil is necessary for survival, where a tyrant rules humanity not from ambition but from duty." Lucifer's expression sharpened with interest. "And what did you do, dutiful brother? Did you fix it?" Michael was silent for a long moment. "I gave them a slightly better foundation. I made reality a little more stable. I saved one child from death. It was not enough. It will never be enough. But it was all I could do without destroying everything or becoming part of their tyranny." He looked at his hands, at the demiurgic flame that had shaped galaxies, that had unmade chaos marines, and healed a dying girl. "I learned something in that place, Lucifer. I learned that power is not enough. That our Father's perfect creation is not the only kind that exists. That sometimes survival requires compromises I never thought I would have to make." Lucifer studied his brother carefully. "You sound different, Michael. Less certain, more doubtful." "Perhaps," Michael agreed. "But doubt is not always weakness. Sometimes it is wisdom. That broken reality taught me that there are no perfect solutions to imperfect problems, that even angels must sometimes choose between bad options and worse ones. That duty is more complicated than simply obeying orders." He spread his wings, preparing to return to his eternal service to the Presence. But he carried with him now the memory of the Warhammer universe, of its suffering and small mercies, of its necessary evils and fragile hopes. He would never forget the Emperor, suffering 10,000 years for people who would never fully appreciate his sacrifice. He would never forget the child in the underhive, whose life he had saved when he could do nothing for the billions around her. And in the Warhammer reality, in the throne room of the Imperial Palace, the Emperor sat upon his golden throne with slightly less agony than before. The barrier between warp and materium held firm, woven with demiurgic power. The daily sacrifice of psychers had decreased by 100 souls. Across the galaxy, summoning rituals failed slightly more often. Demonic manifestations became slightly more difficult. Warp storms raged slightly, less severely. It was not salvation. It was not paradise. It was not even significant improvement by most measures. But in a reality where every advantage was paid for in blood, where every small mercy saved lives, it was something. And sometimes, in the grim darkness of the far future, where there was only war, something was enough. The girl Michael had healed in the underhive survived to adulthood. She never forgot the angel who had saved her. She told her children about him, and they told theirs. The story spread slowly through the lower hives, mutating and changing as stories do, until it became legend. Somewhere in the Imperium's vast mythology, there existed a tale of an angel who had come from beyond the stars, who had touched the warp itself and made it weaker, who had saved one child and then vanished forever. Most dismissed it as superstition, but the girl knew better. She had felt the angel's touch. She had seen his wings of light. And she spent her life trying to live up to his final words. Make something good of this life, if you can. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there was only war, Michael Demiurgos had left behind a small seed of hope. Whether it would grow into something meaningful or wither in the darkness remained to be seen. But it existed, and sometimes, in a reality too corrupted to save completely, existence was victory enough.